So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Criminology Showcase. My name is Erin, and I am from undergraduate recruitment at Lakehead University. Before we start our showcase, there's just a few housekeeping items that I'd like to address. All attendees except for our hosts have been muted for the presentation portion of this webinar, so you don't have to worry about any of your sound. You're not on webcam or anything like that. You can just sit back, relax, and join us for this showcase. However, we do welcome and encourage virtual discussion and questions. So please submit your questions through the Q&A function located in the bottom navigation bar. Alternatively, you may use the chat feature as well. The Q&A function just works best as we can answer questions directly through this feature or use the question answer live button. Please also note that we are recording this webinar. At this time, we're also all working from home, so as a result, there might be some avoidable or unexpected noises in the background, whether it's pets pawing at the door. I live on a busy street, sometimes there's a siren that goes by, but we are working through what we can while we're at home. But now I would like to turn it over to Daniel and Alana so they can introduce themselves and share their exciting showcase with you.
Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to have you here with us. I am Alana Sonia. I'm a faculty member in the Interdisciplinary Studies Department, within which the Criminology Program is situated, and I'm also the coordinator of the Criminology Program. And so I'm going to lead this conversation today. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Daniel Krupp, and he's going to join in to answer questions and tell you a bit about his research. And we want to encourage you to feel free to ask questions as we are chatting away. Certainly, it's something that we're happy to do is answer questions as they come up. Don't feel a need to wait until the end. Now, I guess I'll introduce my background first. I joined Lakehead relatively recently in January 2018, and Danny joined not too long after that. Since that time, we've both been working to advance the criminology program, and we've got components of this program that we're really happy with, and a lot of students that are very happy with it as well. Now, my background is a lot of criminology. I did my bachelor's and master's with an explicit focus on criminology, and then I went into a PhD in sociology, but retained a strong interest in a crim orientation. So most of my research focuses on legal authorities and police quite specifically, and how they use different data collection technologies. For me, it's body-worn cameras. So that is something that I'm very actively attentive to, that for many people, criminology has a strong practitioner orientation. For example, that you might be very interested in being a police officer or being a lawyer. Now, another angle that I find draws people to criminology is I'm not sure what I want to do, but I do know that I like hearing about crime and deviance. It just compels me. And I'm actually one of those people. I came to my first undergraduate degree in criminology as someone who wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but I knew that I really liked to hear about crime and deviance, and criminology seemed like the right program for me. I think that if you're from either one of those orientations, that you're not quite sure what you want to do, but you like to hear about crim topics, or you have a very specific focus, especially something like being a police officer or a lawyer, but certainly other professions as well, then this is a great program for you to consider. So let me talk about why. From the first direction, the idea that you might not really know what you're interested in, but you know you like criminology. We have a great program for that, because even though we are a relatively small program compared to some of your much larger universities in Ontario, we have a very large contingent of students in our program. So the Orillia campus is where we're situated. We're not at all on the Thunder Bay campus. You have to be in Orillia to come into our program. It's not particularly large, but we have a large number of students on that campus. And what it means is it allows us to offer a considerable variety of classes, of courses in any given year. So on an average year, we offer 30 criminology courses that are each a semester-long course. And what that translates to for you as a student who's not quite sure what they want to do is that you have a lot of options in terms of different directions in crim classes you can take. And I'll elaborate on that in a minute, but that's a real important starting point. If you're not quite sure what you want to do, there's a lot of directions that you can go in this program, while still getting to enjoy that smaller campus, smaller, more intimate classroom environment type of university. Now, there's some advantages that carry over from that, you're not quite sure what you want to do, that also complement, I do know explicitly what I want to do. I want to be a police officer, or I want to be a lawyer, or maybe even right now you're thinking, I want to go to graduate school. I think when those in particular, they stand out to me, are your motivations, that Lakehead is a very good option. And the reason for that is that, as I mentioned, you're at a smaller institution where you are able to have much more intimate working relationships with your faculty. For me and for Danny, what this translates into is getting to actually know our students. It's not, a year later you come back to us and ask for a reference and I say, okay, I have to look to my records and see what grade you got in my course, and that's about what I can remember. It's that I tend to have students repeatedly across courses. And that's a product of students looking to take classes with me, of course, and it's helpful when you're a faculty member to actually recognize a student when you're trying to write them a quality reference letter for something like, let's say, going into policing. Or on the other end, if you're interested in professional school like law school or going on to graduate school, being able to secure very high grades is consistently something that's incredibly important to doing well, to being successful in getting into high quality graduate and law school programs. And the bottom line is that while you can certainly achieve that goal at any university you go to if you're a committed student, being at a smaller institution gives you a lot of opportunity to be very successful. Again, that you get to work closely with faculty. You're not in classes of hundreds of students. You are much more able to connect with a professor to say, these are my goals, how do I achieve them, and really working to address, if you do have challenges, how to overcome those. So I'd say that these are some things that I think about just as an entrance point. If you're very much focused on a particular career that's criminology oriented, or if you're just generally interested in the topic, that the crim program at Lakehead offers some really good options for you. Now, in terms of the program itself, let's talk about its structure. In first year, you're required to do 2 criminology courses. One is called Introduction to Criminology, and the other is called Introduction to Criminalistics. Now, Introduction to Criminology is where you start to learn about the foundations of the field of criminology. This does include things like what our criminal justice institutions are, but also starts to introduce you to theories of crime, for example, so that you're going to have a foundation for upper year courses. Introduction to Criminalistics is something that's quite unique to the criminology program at Lakehead relative to other crim programs across Ontario. And what you're dealing with there is the more crime scene oriented, forensics oriented focus. It's not something that's routinely offered at other criminology programs. And so it's often something that students are quite intrigued by. We do have some upper year courses that complement this, like death investigations, criminal profiling, and forensic psychology, that all can be connected to that sort of same orientation. Now, you'll notice I said you only have to do 2 criminology courses in first year, and these are only semester-long courses. What that leaves you with is 8 other semester-long courses. So of course, you can take a year-long course, and that means you've filled up 2 courses that would, of course, usually be a semester long. That leaves you with 8 courses that you are able to pick that are just ones that you find interesting. We do have some parameters. So for example, the criminology degree requires that you take either Introduction to Sociology or Psychology or Political Science, but you get to choose between these 3. And there's also some that are just generally open to you, that you get the opportunity to take several first-year courses without any parameters on them. And the way that the program is structured like that is to encourage you to seek out other areas of interest. What might you be interested in minoring in or double majoring in alongside your criminology major? So it's an opportunity for you to get to explore. And again, this speaks to something that I think is valuable about the CRIM program at Lakehead, that if you're not quite sure what you want to do, there is a lot of opportunity to consider alternative options, or get to explore your options, I guess is what I'm trying to say there. Now, I mentioned up front that the CRIM program is situated within an interdisciplinary studies department. And so what that means is that we have programs that actively focus on English, history, media studies in these sort of arts realms of the social sciences and humanities, as well as, or the humanities is what I should have called those. And then we also have our social science programs. So you could major, for example, in sociology. You could minor in psychology. So a lot of different variants of ways you can mix and match your degree when you're thinking about the program here at Lakehead. Now, moving on into the upper year courses, in second year, you have some more required courses. For example, you have to take, or not for example, you have to take these too. We have criminological theory and then criminological research methods. Now, theory is getting you into explaining why people engage in crime, why crime is more prevalent in some places than others, what the consequences of crime are for people. And of course, the idea being in many cases to try to overcome that. How can we use theory to lower crime, right, in many cases? Criminological research methods is thinking about how you try to test those theories. So how do we go about collecting data in systematic and rigorous ways to actually demonstrate that a theory is accurate or inaccurate, and knowing that both of those outcomes are equally fine? You're testing a theory. You also get some options with electives in second year. So you're required to take 2 criminology electives. We have 3 courses that are always offered every single year in the second year, and that is race, ethnicity, and crime as one course, gender and crime as a second, and youth and crime as a third. So we're getting into these substantive topics that might intrigue you if you're interested in any of those particular areas. And we also have some other what we call cross-listed courses. For example, we have some political science courses that deal with the criminal law, for example, that start to show up in second year. Not always offered, but routinely offered. Once you get into third and fourth year, you really get into the realm of all of our options. And this is where I like to introduce the fact that I'd say there's 3 sort of streams that exist in the courses we offer at Lakehead in the CRIM program. One is that forensic stream. So it starts with the introduction to criminalistics in first year and carries on into courses like death investigation in upper years. The second is a focus on criminal justice institutions. I haven't mentioned that much yet. Of course, you get an introduction to it in the Introduction to Criminology course, but in third year, you start to be able to really branch off into that if you're interested. So for example, there's a course routinely offered on policing, on courts, and on corrections. You can also follow those up in fourth year with some advanced courses in these areas. For example, the politics of incarceration, mass incarceration, that particular course is called. The third stream of courses that I like to think of us as having are social justice oriented topics. And we saw that with our second year courses. So a focus on gender, a focus on race, and a focus on youth as special topic areas in relation to criminology. But we see that continue on in our upper year courses in third and fourth year. For example, we have a course that focuses on issues in Indigenous justice. There's many other examples we could think about there too, but I also just want to, instead of bombarding you with too many, let you know that we do have other variants that just kind of pique people's interest. So for example, a course focused on violence and extremism, a course focused on cybercrime. So there's various classes that I think appeal to everybody once we get across the gamut that are offered here. Now, one last thing I'll say about the structure of the program is that in fourth year, you are required to complete a course called field exposure. And this, if you're wondering if we have a field placement program, is the alternative. We offer 2 field placement. We do not have a field placement program if you are interested in field placement, Carleton and Ottawa are both universities that are particularly known for field placements, being well situated in Ottawa for doing so. But we do not have one, as many programs do not have them. What we offer instead is this field exposure course, and what it does is bring practitioners into the classroom. So across the 12 weeks of the semester, the goal is to bring in a practitioner group each week to be able to learn about specific areas, specific fields you could go into once you're completed your degree. So we're talking about things, yes, like policing and corrections and courts, but we're also thinking beyond that. On the back end, something like victim services and probation. On the front end, we're thinking about various organizations that help divert people from coming in contact with the law, for example, the John Howard or Elizabeth Fry societies. So beyond actually taking that course in networking, so learning about these different job opportunities, which I think is frankly very valuable compared to a field placement where you're learning about just one, you're also focused on developing your professional portfolio for after graduation. So preparing things like a resume, a cover letter, practicing interviewing. These are the objectives of that course. Now, thinking about the program, not in its specifics, but more in relation to Lakehead and what the university sort of offers, something that or a few key things that I like to highlight. One, even though the Crim program is relatively large compared to other programs at Lakehead and certainly on the Aurelia campus, it is a smaller program compared to our big universities around the province. And what that equates to is smaller classes for students. Now, we used to, as of right now, cap first year courses in criminology at 120 students. And then it would go down from there. We'd have 60 students in second year, 40 students in third year, and 20 students in fourth year classes. So the goal is to keep the classroom experience quite intimate for students. But we actually can say that the new change as of this coming year is for first year courses to actually capped at 60. And this was to try to bring the Crim program really in line with other programs across the university, in part so that we can give students that same sort of quality experience of close interactions with faculty members. And I can say we've got a new faculty member joining us this fall who's actually going to be teaching all those new extra sessions of Introduction to Criminology. She's wonderful, Deborah McKinnon. So that is something to look forward to. But when we're thinking about small classes, it's a great opportunity for you to reach your full potential and build relationships with faculty members, as well as for some people, being in a smaller classroom can be a more comfortable environment for meeting friends and working with peers. Now, what I would say beyond that, and I did mention this already, but I do want to note that even though it's a smaller campus and a smaller program compared to other universities, it is a large program at this campus. And what that means is we get a lot of courses. So as I said, routinely we're offering 30 courses a year. There's no shortage on courses for students to take. And when it comes to electives, we often see students entirely fill up their electives in their degree program with Crim courses. So there's a huge amount of courses you can actually take. Now I want to start to wrap us off here. So before I move it off to Danny and take up too much time here, let's talk about some jobs. You might be wondering, yourself and your parents, what jobs can I do with a criminology degree? And what you need to recognize with any degree in the social sciences, I will say, in all honesty, it's not so much what you've learned, it's demonstrating that you have the ability to learn, to be consistent, to perform well, to develop relationships, to have people vouch for you. That is important. But of course, getting some content-specific knowledge, for example, about the criminal justice system, about social relationships, is of course valuable. Now, obvious places that we see our students go: policing, corrections, onto law school. Those are three really big ones that I see students go into. But there's certainly less obvious options as well. So I already mentioned the Elizabeth Fry and John Howard societies. but Boys and Girls Clubs of Canada, children's aid societies, group homes, all these ways in which we're working with youth to help them either avoid the criminal justice system or to move through it as effectively as possible. The broader criminal justice system, we're thinking about victim services agencies, civilian police employees, including crime analysts. If that's your orientation, make sure you get working on your stats courses. Probation officer, Canada Border Services Agency, or CSIS, when we're starting to think about the national level. And that does get us into the idea of government and ministry work as well. People who get degrees in the social sciences are very well equipped to go into all sorts of ministry work at both the provincial and the national level, and not just provincial within Ontario. So, for example, friends of mine that I did my undergraduate with went on to go out to Alberta to work in a ministry out there in our sort of equivalent of child and youth services. So you do want to recognize that there's lots of opportunities, but you have to hustle to get them. You do have to look for them. So going through pretty much any university degree is not going to guarantee you a job at the end, but it does demonstrate that you have the skills to be successful in a job, and you want to leverage them as effectively from there. Now, two things before I pass it off to Danny. Really good qualities about this school. The sort of indisputable one are the scholarships. So if you are above an 80% average, you are guaranteed some sort of scholarship that you don't even need to apply for it. It's incremental, and you do get more the higher your average goes. But at an 80% baseline level, as long as you maintain that throughout the university, you will get a guaranteed amount of money each year. And that's pretty exceptional. It's one of the best scholarship programs across Canada routinely. I also will note that Lakehead University is routinely recognized as amongst the top universities in the country for undergraduate research opportunities. Now, this is something in particular that I've contributed to. I've had a lot of undergraduates work with me. For example, over the past couple of years, I've been working with police services to evaluate their body-worn camera programs, and actually Danny's worked with me on these projects as well. And one of the really fun projects we did was alongside RIDE programs, which you might be familiar with. These programs intended to stop drinking and driving, and we see police officers set up these RIDE lines during the festive season, especially November and December. Well, we were interested in whether or not body-worn cameras affected the way people felt about these interactions with officers. And I had a team of 10 research assistants who helped in gathering that information and got to be out there working with those officers and on those RIDE lines. And I know for everybody that doesn't sound fun, but it was really fun for us. So we had a great time with that. But there's all sorts of different research that people do across the university. So we also have Beth Visser, who's a forensic psychologist who is part of our criminology program here. And she teaches a class that's always exceptionally popular that focuses on psychopathic personalities. And then Danny has a focus on evolution as it relates to violence. I'm going to turn it over to Danny now so he can tell you a bit about his research.
Sure. Thanks, Alana. So I know there are a fair number of burning questions that are happening at the same time. So I'm going to be quite brief so that we can get to these questions. But as Alana said, I'm fairly new to the university as well. I joined in the summer of 2018. My background is in psychology, and sort of half on purpose, half accidentally, I wound up in a forensic lab after forensic lab. So my interest is in sort of marrying evolutionary biology with psychology and economics and sociology and anthropology. It's sort of this big mix of stuff. It's a good fit to be in the interdisciplinary studies department for me. But everywhere sort of I went to study, I wound up being interested in problems that had to do with forensics. And so criminology was just kind of a natural fit for me at the end of the day, which is why I applied for the job here. And so, as Alana mentioned, my main focus is on evolutionary theory and how it can tell us something about violence. But I also teach the criminological theory course at the second year level, and I teach the fourth year research course for the students who are interested in that. And research is a big part of what I love to do. It's actually probably between that and teaching, it's kind of a fight on regularly about which one I love a little bit more. But if anybody's ever interested in that sort of thing, there's lots and lots and lots of opportunities, as Alana mentioned, for students to get involved. We take training for research quite seriously, because not only does it help you if you say you want to go to grad school or something like that, it helps you with tons of other jobs that you wouldn't have necessarily expected it to. And so Alana and I can both say that we've managed to write reference letters for students who've wound up getting jobs, doing all sorts of things, working for the OPP, law school, graduate school, lots of practical jobs as well, where those kinds of skills turned out to sort of push them towards the forefront of the application pile, because they could do things that lots of other students weren't able to do. So I'm going to stop there with my own stuff, and maybe we'll go to some of these questions, which I know some of them have been sort of half answered, but I feel like we could probably elaborate a little bit more. Erin, do you want to pick one, or should we just go ahead?
You can go with either of them. I've marked them to answer live, so either one.
Right.
There's one that I kind of answered behind the scenes already.
But.
Yeah.
Mind reading
okay,
it
so
out?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So the first one that came in was from an anonymous attendee, and it says, for those who want to be a coroner, would you recommend the degree in forensics pathology, or rather join the criminology program?
No.
Maybe try the interdisciplinary program. Yeah.
Yeah, so you will definitely not become a coroner with a crim degree. You might be able to, consider minoring or even majoring in crim alongside pursuing that, but I'm actually not entirely familiar with what the pathway would be to coroner, but yeah, it's definitely not through a crim program.
Yeah. So, criminology can add obviously lots to it. But yeah, what, as Alana mentioned earlier, what this particular criminology program offers in the way of that are our criminalistics courses, which again, most other criminology programs don't offer anything of the sort. So this would be more complementary, but no, graduates of a criminology program anywhere wouldn't wind up being coroners just with that degree alone. And the interdisciplinary studies program, the broader program, wouldn't really help you with that either, because it would be less focused on the relevant points. The criminology program would actually be a closer fit to that, although again, not something that you'd finish that and you become a coroner. There's almost certainly more education involved in that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's it actually requires a medical degree. I'm not sure.
I don't know either. I would imagine it does, but I don't know either. I want to go back, even though it's been partly answered, I wanted to go back to Nicole's questions. So Nicole had a whole bunch of questions, of which some have been answered and some haven't. So we'll maybe just take them in turn here. So the first few questions were, will classes be online or mixed with in person? The university has announced that come September, the plan is to move ahead with in-person education. My understanding is that that's what most Canadian universities are saying that they're planning on doing. But of course, just like a year ago, there were lots of plans that changed as a function of the pandemic. And so what I would say is that the current goal is to have in-person education in September. But based on what happens now, what happens with vaccinations, I think that's something that you should keep a question mark around, and we'll presumably have a better answer in the summer than we do right now. So this is the hope. But another question from Nicole was, I've heard with criminology, you need to take computer science and statistics classes. Is choosing to pursue criminology worth it? I don't necessarily want to sit at a desk all day. It's my job after I graduate. I like being with people and in the field too. So maybe I'll address the statistics and computer science part, and then Alana can talk about the desk job element of this. So our program does not require you to take statistics courses. It does not require you to take computer science courses. That said, if you speak to a lot of criminologists, they will tell you that those are very helpful things. And so, for instance, if you take my fourth year research course, components of that have to do with elementary statistics. I teach them in the class, and I will be building in more of that over time to allow students to have a good sense of how to do those kinds of things, because for researchers, those skills are really, really useful. But if you're not interested in the research pathway, then you're not obligated to take those kinds of courses. We do offer, not in the criminology program, but psychology offers a statistics course that a number of students in criminology elect to take as an elective course. So they're not obligated to, but they take it because they want to sort of enrich their studies in that direction. They want to learn more about quantitative methods and ways of dealing with quantitative data. And so statistics courses are really useful for that sort of thing. They're, in fact, sort of essential for that sort of thing. But again, it's not obligatory, and I don't think it will be anytime soon in this program, but it is something that, you know, we encourage if that's a direction you want to go into, and you certainly have opportunities. And then, Alana, if you want to answer the question. So again, is choosing to pursue criminology worth it? I don't necessarily want to sit at a desk all day as my job after I graduate. I'd like being with people and in the field too.
Yeah, well, I think that actually crim is a great option if that is your goal, to work with people. You know, there's lots of professional directions we see people go in following a criminology degree that do just that. So off the top of my head, policing and corrections comes to mind, certainly. But then also thinking about the many other directions I suggested you could go in with regards to things like group homes, dealing with youth who are in conflict with the law on the back end, so probation officers, dealing with adults in the same capacity. So we see lots of opportunities there for actually a lot of field work, specifically oriented towards this criminal justice type of background. So certainly, though there are many desk-related jobs one could pursue with a criminology degree, I think it's actually one of the areas that you see people be able to pursue a lot of field work as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another attendee asked, does the criminology program allow for students to study abroad? Yes,
it does. So that's a good question. Lakehead actually in general has quite a strong study abroad program. In theory, you could complete all of your second and third year abroad. You could even complete a semester of fourth year abroad. You do need to be back in town for that field exposure course, because that's a required course in fourth year, but you can complete a whole lot of your degree abroad in criminology. And I'd say on a regular basis, we have at least 5 or 6 students take their third year and go abroad. It's something that if you want to do, you absolutely can. And Lakehead has connections all over the world for universities that you can pursue that with.
Great. And then, so one more question that's popped up is whether or not, and I think, and so let us know if I'm interpreting this correctly, but I think the question is effectively, when doing the criminalistics courses that we have, do the students get to actually get some exposure directly in the field? So do they get to learn about actual crime scenes? Do they get to observe a professional perform an autopsy? You know, so, is that sort of available to them?
Yes and no. So the death investigation course, for example, or I meant to actually say introduction to criminalistics course there. So both of these are routinely offered and they are in-class courses. Now the person who teaches those for us presently, her name is Carol Ann Wood, and she is very much skilled in terms of in the field death investigation. She was connected to the Picton case, for example, in terms of unearthing remains there. So she herself has that field experience. She has in the past taught courses that did include a field component. For example, she taught a special topics course that focused on forensic anthropology, which is certainly a direction that we see people go in when they are interested in these sorts of field type digs regarding bones and bodies and whatnot. Generally speaking, no, you know, most university courses in the social sciences, we are talking about in-class components, but some opportunities, yes.
One thing I want to point out, just because I don't want us to fall under the radar, is Alana earlier mentioned one of the major advantages of coming to Lakehead has to do with the scholarships that we have available. Aaron very kindly popped up in the chat a link for information about scholarships, awards, and bursaries. For those of you who are interested, just open up the chat window and you can see a link right there that'll take you to the relevant page that gives you that kind of information. It's probably one of the most important pages that you can have access to through the Lakehead website. Okay, another question just come in. One of the questions was about joining the crim program instead of getting enrolled in the forensic pathology. That makes me wonder, if I also want to be a coroner, would you recommend joining the crim program first and go to medical school to become a coroner just for experience?
So I was just Googling because I don't know, other than this, I need a minute to like actually figure out what's involved in becoming a coroner, but it doesn't actually look like you need to be a doctor to be a coroner. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So, you know, if that's something that's interesting to you, you need to definitely pursue it more, because Danny and I don't have the specific answers for you right now. And I don't know if possibly, you know, the recruitment team at Lakehead might have better answers on that front, but it does look to me like it's a certification type of program. You're going to want to take something that will provide you with the sort of basic foundations that are key to whatever you'd be doing as a coroner. So I would say that you'd want to figure that out and take the most appropriate program there. Intuitively do not think it's criminology, but that's not to suggest that you can't major in the sort of the more social science component of what criminology is at the same time. But I think you're looking elsewhere. Erin, do you have any comments on that?
I don't have any additional information. I'd have to kind of look into additional resources. I did post a link to a job posting that I had found that might give some information on the pathway. So that's probably how this question came about, just because I'm not 100% sure either, but I can give the email to this participant and follow up as well.
Great.
I mean, I imagine, sort of following up on what Alana was saying, that you know, coroner is a very specific aspect of the sort of broader forensic enterprise, and criminology, for the most part, is a social science, as Alana said. The area that's most closely related to classical sort of, you know, anatomy, physiology, things like that, as well as crime scene investigation, those elements, is the criminalistics courses that are taught in our program. But they're, you know, they're important, but they're a minority set of courses. We only offer a few of them. Again, that's more than most criminology programs offer. But, you know, it's not the foundation of this program. You won't be able to take 17 different criminalistics courses in this program. So, you know, again, if you're interested in more of the life sciences, physical sciences elements of this, then criminology is probably not exactly the direction that you might want to go in. It might complement it very well as a minor or as a second major or something like that. But as Alana said, you should really do your research into what are the skills and courses that are typically expected of a you know, background of a pathologist, a coroner, and from there you can say, okay, what programs sort of best fit that sort of thing. Another question here is there any recommendations where to study abroad for criminology? So where is the question?
So I don't think that there's anything specific. You know, we've had students go to Singapore, to the UK, to Australia. You know, those ones I know I've written references for. So it's really, where do you want to go? I would say that that's a key starting point. Where do I feel like I would like to study abroad? You know, if you were really interested in getting your foot in the door at some particular criminology institution, I would say that the ones that come to mind, it's funny, there's limited opportunities with US study abroad. I actually, to the point that when I say limited, I don't know that they do any. Something I'm not quite sure about with Lakehead, if they actually do that. Erin might know, but there are exceptional crim programs in the UK. So Cambridge would certainly come to mind. Yeah, if I was telling a student, oh, think about, you know, doing a study abroad with the intention of studying abroad at some particular institution, that would be sort of one I might think about. But I think many students just think about it in terms of where they'd like to go and go from there. And that actually brings up something that I didn't mention before that I was wishing I had. When you do study abroad, you are still paying domestic tuition. So that's nice. Regardless of where you're going, the tuition is consistent. Erin, do you know about connections with the United States? Because that's where a lot of great crim programs are.
I just took a look through our partner institutions for study abroad, and there's just one in the US, in Michigan. So other than that, we don't have any more partner institutions.
What one is it in Michigan?
Michigan Tech.
Yeah, I don't know. If it was Michigan State, I'd say, well, that's a good one anyway, but I don't know about Michigan Tech.
To elaborate a little bit more, and correct me if I'm wrong, Erin or Alana, but my understanding is that for a fair amount of students who do the abroad sort of courses and programs, they often do their electives
Yes.
abroad rather than their main focus, their major courses.
Yep.
Often because the courses for a major, especially something like criminology, they're not always offered everywhere, and they're we have specific required courses that you need to take, which there isn't necessarily an equivalent at another school. So a lot of students will say, okay, I'm going to focus on my major courses here at Lakehead, but I'm going to sort of take a bunch of different minors when I go to Singapore or Italy, or I'm just spitballing here, but other places. Certainly colleagues of mine over the years, that's what they've done when they were students as well. Okay, one more question here. What percentage of the criminology graduates usually go into law school, and what areas or subjects do they usually take?
Well, that's a good question. We don't have those sort of statistics, unfortunately. When I think about it in terms of the number of students who are asking me for reference letters, so right now we have about 220 crim majors, perhaps about 40 of them are in the 4th year. And I'd say in any given year, I've been routinely asked for maybe about 4 or 5 letters for students going on to law school. So if I'm using my rough statistics there, we're seeing maybe about 10%. I wouldn't say that's an overestimate in terms of crim programs. A lot of people who come to crim programs want to go on to law school. I certainly saw that in my undergraduate as well. Now, in terms of the types of courses, you don't have to worry too much about that. I'd certainly encourage you to take courses that engage with the law. I'd certainly encourage you to take courses that engage with social issues like race, women, youth in conflict with the law, to understand these issues in their social context. But you will learn what you need to know in terms of being an effective lawyer at law school. So it's really about exposing yourself to the breadth of topics that interest you in relation to criminology, so that you can start to get a gauge of, well, am I somebody who might be interested in corporate law versus criminal defense versus prosecution versus family law? Just get a sense of what it is that interests you, and then you'll fine tune that as you go into law school.
Honestly, to me, that's the single best piece of advice you could ever have in university, is just figure out what it is that interests you and what you want to pursue. Take those courses. They're going to be easier for you, not because they're easy, but because you're actually excited about them, you're passionate about them, you're going to put more into them and come out ahead as a consequence. So if you want to go to law school because you're really excited about the law, chances are you're going to wind up taking some law relevant courses and be really excited about them. Unless, of course, it turns out that you're not into the law in the end anyway, but that's a good lesson to learn too.
It is a good lesson. And, when I started my undergraduate degree, this is a funny thing that Danny's brought up, but I thought I wanted to be a lawyer at a point. And I was so excited about this class that was focused on prosecutions. And of my entire undergraduate degree, it's the class that I remember hating the most. And I reoriented from there. So, you do learn lessons as well.
Yeah. That's all the questions that have been posted. Did anybody else have anything that they'd like to ask they can throw up in the Q&A?
We do also have the chat on the side, so if you don't want to throw a question into the Q&A, you can also throw it into the chat option as well. But if not, so if nobody else has any additional questions for our faculty, someone from my department will be connecting with everyone after this webinar just to kind of see if you have any additional questions or anything like that that you need answered. But there is another question here.
One question was, is it possible to do second year courses in the first year so you're able to study abroad?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, you don't need to do second year courses in your first year to be able to study abroad. So though Danny did mention that, oftentimes students are filling up their courses abroad with electives, every course, every program you're going to go to that's going to offer crim is going to have a crim theory course. So you're going to be able to oftentimes get some of these required courses, but at the same time, when he says, you might go abroad, well, you spend your second year abroad, but you're filling up electives that are also going to be part of your third year. The point is that you're going to be able to go and take either a semester or a full year abroad without having to worry about that impacting your ability to complete your degree requirements. You cannot, in theory, take courses out of order. So we have a prerequisite program that, for example, in criminology, requires that for you to get into your second year courses, you need to have completed your first year courses. So generally speaking, this sort of tiered system is how you structure completion of a university degree, just to help ensure preparedness, but it doesn't mean that you can't still study abroad. You can do your whole first year, indicate in your first year that in second year you want to be getting out and studying abroad. I'd say it's most commonly third year that people do that when they're only doing a semester or 1 year. But I am aware of a student who did almost entirely their Lakehead University degree abroad. So certainly you can do it if it's of interest to you immediately.
A question popped up in the chat window. Can you please talk about your experience with criminology? What are your favorite aspects?
It's going to be so unique, right, for both Danny and I, because the thing with criminology is when somebody says, in a lay sort of sense, what is criminology? It's so many things. There's a conference each year called the American Society of Criminology that Canadian criminologists usually go to as well. And we're talking about over 5,000 attendees there. People dealing with things around, drugs, people dealing with proactive crime prevention by police, people dealing with best rehabilitation strategies for offenders and for particular types of offenders, let's say sexual offenders. There's this enormous scope of topics that come under the realm of criminology. But for me, when I think about what I enjoy most, it's the research that I do, which kind of broadly deals with legal authorities and their relationships with us as members of the public. And my focus is, how do we make those interactions as successful as possible? In what way does technology preserve, enhance, or negatively impact those interactions? Things like body-worn cameras and drones and automated license plate readers, all that sort of stuff. So that's what I find super compelling and interesting, the nature of the relationships that we have with legal authorities and how those change with technology. What about you, Danny?
So even though you said, it's going to be very sort of individual or idiosyncratic how we answer this, until you said it, frame things the way you just framed things, it never really occurred to me that my interests are very similar. My favorite things also have to do with how, what you might call policy, whether it's implicit or explicit, but how, sort of bigger structures affect individual psychology for being nice versus nasty. So I usually tell people that I study the psychology of cooperation and conflict. And that's, as Alana said, these are really big topics, right? I mean, just about anything social falls under that kind of umbrella. But I'm especially interested how things like income inequality, for instance, how that might shape the way we behave with each other, how nice we are, how not nice we are, whether or not we engage in violence, in particular homicide, as a consequence of things like income inequality. And I find it just so fascinating because these are things that, as a scientist, you can actually collect data on and answer these questions. Sometimes it's hard work, often it's hard work, but it's also really, really rewarding because then you can actually sort of come up with an answer and say, well, this tells us that if policy had been a little bit different, if we sort of changed things a little bit in the redistribution of incomes or whatever it happens to be, we could actually make the world a safer place, potentially, right? And so having those kinds of answers can really sort of help us make better decisions, which I think is really important and rather exciting.
Yeah. It's funny. So even though Danny and I have had very different training, and sort of relates to the idea that you might all be coming here with very different perspectives. on what you find interesting. We found this common ground, and he's speaking about key elements of it there, the focus on collecting empirical data, which is often the interest of criminologists, and making changes to policy to make our world as as good. It's a terrible research term. What does good mean? But to make the world a better place. That's,
Yeah,
often
exactly. One last question popped up here. Sorry, Aaron, did you have something to say?
No, I was going to read the question, but it's all
Go
good.
ahead.
Can you take law-related courses in the program, Canadian institution, criminal law, human rights, etc.?
Yeah, so we have many cross-list friends. So sociology, political science, media studies, off the top of my head are ones that we cross-list, but there's more. But excuse me, not sociology. Political science has the real law sort of orientation. They actually have a pre-law program as well. And so we do see opportunities for students to take those courses. You could take them just as an elective to round out, requirements of taking second, third, or fourth year courses. But the ones that are cross-listed, so it means that it's been recognized as including crim content, you can take, and that actually counts towards degree requirements like, let's say, a second or third or fourth year crim course specifically.
Right, and that looks like that's all the questions that we have, and I know we're running out of time soon, but if anyone has any last minute questions, please feel free to pop those in the Q&A, or again, there's also the chat function as well.
I know that at these types of things, sometimes you will have a question. Well, a question is bubbling, but it's not quite produced itself for you yet. So just remember that you're very welcome to go ahead and reach out to the university. Just calling into the general university inquiry line would ultimately get you either back to myself or Danny or somebody who can answer your question. So, don't ever hesitate to reach out and let us know if you do have questions.
One more has popped up that I think we can answer pretty easily here. Are the law-related courses usually online since the pre-law is based at Thunder Bay?
So it's a good question. Yes and no. It varies. Let's frame it this way. If you wanted to complete a minor in criminology, I can guarantee you could get a minor in criminology through online programming. We offer some amount of online courses each year. However, I couldn't promise you, with the exception of COVID, that you would have been able to complete your major online. And that goes for the pre-law program as well. It is not inherently an online program. So it's up to them to choose. And every year we have at least a few courses. So in criminology, we offer a minimum of 6 courses online every year. But those courses definitely are patterned around our minor to make sure that students in Thunder Bay could take a minor in criminology if they wanted to. Bottom line is, yes, there are online programming options, but it's not enough to say that you'd be able to, get a pre-law from Aurelia, for example.
Still open to some questions. We have about 5 more minutes before we kind of need to hard deadline end our webinar. But again, for anyone that does have questions after this webinar, as Lana mentioned, questions might be bubbling. You might not have exactly how you might want to ask the question yet, or if you have questions after. Again, someone from our department in undergraduate recruitment is contacting everyone who has attended, or even people who have not attended, and will be asking if they have any additional questions, and they'll sort of be also your source of contact as well for anything. Right. So it doesn't look like we have any additional questions, so I would like to thank Elena and Daniel for joining us for our showcase today and telling us all about the criminology program. And seeing a lot of these showcases, I really feel like I probably took the wrong major in school. You guys really make the criminology program a program that I'd love to take, and hopefully everyone else in the showcase in the audience also feels the same way as well.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for attending. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.